So I keep talking about the neuron. If you look on the screen, it's really important to understand how neurons work. We have the main body, or the nucleus of the cell body, and you see all those little branches coming off of them. Those are the dendrites. Those are a lot of times neurons are just taking information from a dendrite and then firing another pulse down the axon. And the axon is the thing that we usually think of when it comes to a nerve or a nerve fiber. Most of the time we think that neurons are in the brain and they fire down a nerve fiber into some part of the body. That would be an outgoing nerve. That would be more likely for a lot of times it's for timing of certain things. Our nervous system is really, really about timing. Whether that's like a motor system or something like that, or the way that your heart beats, or the respiration that you have, the way that our body does certain processes, even with the organs themselves. But that axon is one long fiber that goes out and has little feelers on the end of it. The little feelers can be, if it's outgoing, maybe those feelers are attached to muscle fibers that contract when a pulse is sent down that axon. And then if you reverse the process, what's on the end of those feelers for sensory things that are underneath your skin, now they're waiting for something to happen on the ends of those sensors, those endings, those sensory endings, whether it's a pressure sensor, whether it's heat and cold, whether it's something that's for pain, different types of pain, chemical reactions. Those things will actually send information back up the axon to your spinal cord and then further up the spinal cord. And there's actually decisions made in your spinal cord as well that we'll get to. Then there's things wrapped around these Schwann cells that are wrapped around some of the axons. What's important for you to know, and I don't want to dig too detailed into this at this point in the introduction, but it's important for you to know that the length of the axons, the speed that sensors fire up those axons, it's very important. The timing and the speed of those. We usually think of MS, multiple sclerosis, as these Schwann cells starting to degrade, and they're being built by glial cells and maintained. They're just nothing but fascia strips that are wrapped around, and what they're designed to do is to allow the axon to fire very fast up that axon. And as those supporting Schwann cells and myelin sheaths is what they're called, when those start to degrade, now the timing is completely off, and it is because it's off because of a physical deformity. And a lot of times we can help to remove some of the barriers to that on a physical sense with BFRT, but then any changes you make to what the brain knew about the body at that particular time, you need to tell the body something has changed, and that's where VCT comes in. So we're going to get a really good understanding of neurons in this training. And then the sensories, the senses that we deal with, if you look at the picture here, we're really talking about underneath the skin. So when vibration is coming in from this tuning fork, it's going to reach the skin. And one of those other things that we looked at very deeply is to understand that when vibration hits the skin, what happens? Does that vibration make it, how far does that vibration make it into the skin? And again, this is another thing that my understanding of vibration, using it with 22 years in the Navy, is that the ability for this tuning fork to have enough mechanical vibration through the air, and then what happens when it actually hits the skin, and how deep can it actually get there. A lot of us in sound healing think that every little cell, that if I strike this tuning fork and I'm out here, that vibration is going to make it not only into the skin, but it's going to make it into the bone, it's going to make it through bone, and it's going to take every cell in this person's body, and they're going to change the resonant frequency of the cell and those sorts of things. We're going to tell you something different in VCT, and it has a lot to do with just the physics of how this sound travels through the air and what happens once it hits the body. We're more likely to, by the way, we're holding it 3 to 5 inches off the body in VCT, we're more likely to activate the sensors underneath the skin. That's what you're seeing in this picture here. In this picture, there's a couple sensors that we consider touch-based sensors or tactile sensors. They're sensors that are not only just underneath the skin, but they can also be deeper into the skin as well. We're talking about Meissner corpuscles. We're talking about Merkel discs. Those are the things inside the pads, just underneath the pads of your fingers. If you think about how can somebody that reads by Braille able to tell the depth and in a dot pattern when they read Braille, that's because these Merkel discs are just underneath the surface of your finger pads. And then there's the Ruffini endings, which are also deeper into your skin, and the Ruffini endings have a lot more to do with movements of your musculoskeletal system. And then there's what I would consider the best, the rock star when it comes to tactile sensors, is this Pacinian corpuscle, which you see on the left side of this picture. The Pacinian corpuscles are very well suited, and I think they're at the basis of everything that we do with sound healing and vibration hitting the body, and how do we feel sensations when it comes to vibration. A Pacinian sensor, if you look at it, it's got something in the center, a neuron ending, and that's the actual thing that sends a pulse up that axon. But then it's surrounded by all these different layers. It's kind of like an onion, but each one of those layers has fluid in between them. And even when you do not touch the surface of your skin and you send vibration into the skin, it's the Pacinian corpuscles that actually can deform without touch. And not only that, but it's fast enough and rapidly adapting. So what that really means is that when you first start putting vibration on the person's skin, that these Pacinian corpuscles will deform, and then it will be enough deformity to send pulses up to the brain. But then what happens afterwards is it adapts because of the physical construction of that ending, and it won't continue to report things up to the brain until something changes, and that would be either it stops or the increase or the intensity increases. Then also the ability for the vibration, the communication from the vibration, the amount of times that you get a vibration is the exact amount of times that a pulse will be sent up to the brain through the spinal cord. And that's very important when it comes to vibrational chronotherapy. A lot of times when we put vibration into the body, these sensors that sense vibration, they're only firing sometimes. When the Pacinian corpuscle actually fires, it fires at the exact same rate, or tries to fire at the exact same rate as the frequency of the tuning fork that you're using. So that way, when we use 120, or let's see, in this case, 256 hertz, when I'm putting that into the body or holding it above the body, that is the exact same frequency of oscillations and pulses sent up to the brain. So that's pretty important for vibrational chronotherapy, especially since we're using that as an external Zeitgeber to change the rhythm of the brain, and to also have the body show where everything is in space and in time. Another thing that we use, the reason why we do our brain calibration, where we're holding the tuning forks near the auditory canal when we're near the head, is the skull is a big barrier to vibration. And this is another one of those areas where one of the accepted principles in sound healing is that we can put vibration into every part of our body, and that it could travel, so the sound can travel through bone, and that anatomy-wise, that's a very hard concept to get past. And as you dig deeper through that, if you go into the and speak with an ultrasound technician or look through the literature for ultrasound, which is high frequency sound with a paddle, and you're trying to put vibration, mechanical vibration into the body for it to be bounced off of these various layers of density, that bone is a big deal. They actually have to position these ultrasound paddles in a certain way to get through or around bone, because when it hits bone, it bounces off or stays inside of bone. And it's really based off of density. When sound hits density of greater differing densities, it bounces off. Just like when I'm talking here in this room, that the air density and the density of the wall behind me, that most of that sound is going to bounce right off the wall and echo around the room. The same thing occurs when I'm talking to her, to Lucy. My vibration is coming right into her skin. A lot of it's bouncing off because the density of her skin, the outer skin, is much greater, different than the density of the air. And when it gets to bone, that's a huge density difference. And it's going to, a lot of that's just going to bounce off and echo right off or reflect right off of the bone. That's a problem with the skull. When we're trying to affect the rhythm in the neurons inside of the skull, there's a lot of layers there with differing densities. We have some soft skin in her skull, and then we hit the bone of her skull, and there's a thickness there. A lot of that vibration, especially if it's introduced from the air, a lot of that vibration is going to bounce right off that skull, and you're going to lose a lot of the decibel intensity from this tuning fork. So when it comes to dealing with neurons inside the brain, our best route is through the auditory system, through things like binaural and monaural input right through the auditory canal. And then we're going to talk about the different ways that your brain processes the auditory system. And that's been a well-known and a well-researched process. In fact, the brain is one of the best researched processes, especially since you can use EEG and a lot of the diagnostic equipment. That's something that has a lot of data out there as far as the auditory system. So we're going to use the auditory system when it comes to the brain calibration, and we're going to talk to you about the science involved in that. So this was just an introduction, just to show you or talk to you about VCT. When it comes down to the actual processes, is nothing more than we're just going to hold the tuning fork, we're going to strike it with some sort of striker like this, and we're, for the full body calibration, we're just going to hold it real close to the body. You can see that everything that we're doing is getting up close to the body. We're using the nervous system, we're using the vibration sensors in our skin to do certain things. When we get near her head, we're going to be doing things like binaural, using 2 tuning forks, one on each side, and we're going to hold them near the ear canal. We're actually going to do tracking, which is using her, well, she has her mask on right now, but we're also going to make sure that the auditory system around her eyes can also calibrate itself with the visual acuity in what we call horizontal tracking. And we'll use the tuning forks to make sure that her audio system can still pick up where everything is in space, which is a very big deal when it comes to what the brain knows about its external environment, because again, that's a Zeitgeber that's feeding information in from a sensor. And it's also a very big thing for balance, and it's also a very big thing to make sure that what you're seeing and what you're hearing all match up. And a lot of those things, we start to peel back those layers, we can start to undo some of the things that happen to us over time that we don't realize. That we may have had what didn't seem like a traumatic event a long time ago that kind of lead up to, we continue to have greater and greater prediction errors over time. and our body just can't get back into synchronization because there's what the brain thinks is supposed to happen and what the body is telling the brain is happening are two way different things, and these synchronizations just can't synchronize to each other anymore. When two gears can't align together anymore and synchronize, they break. But we have timing systems that can actually are supposed to be connected to each other. They can actually do what's called free running. And for emergency reasons, I mean, if we had one traumatic event and we were like a fainting goat, our systems would shut down like that if we couldn't possibly separate the timing of the two in free run for extended periods of time. So what we're going to show you at the beginning in these videos, we're going to show you the protocols and how to use them from a clinical standpoint. And that way, if you want to do this for your family, that's okay. If you want to do this as a living, that's okay. And we're going to deal with it from a clinician standpoint. And you're going to have the science behind it, so that you can go in and tell your clients or tell somebody from a professional standpoint, look, this is not pseudoscience. Here's exactly what we know about the body. Here's the tuning fork that can change what the body is doing. And that is at the essence of what we do in vibrational chronotherapy. I want to thank you for joining us for this journey. What's going to happen here is you can have the ability to watch through these videos in sequence through our site, and then at a certain point you're going to be given the ability to prove what you know, and the outcome of that will be a certification through NEC Academy, so that you can use that in a professional setting if you choose to do so.